Saint Veronica Giuliani was born on 27 December 1660 in the small town of Mercatello sul Metauro in the Italian region of Umbria. Her baptismal name was Ursula Giuliani. From a very early age, the girl showed extraordinary signs of spiritual sensitivity and an inclination toward a life of prayer. Her deeply religious parents perceived, even in Ursula's childhood, that she possessed a soul singularly touched by grace. The Giuliani family was large and humble, made up of 7 sisters. Even among so many children, Ursula stood out for her precocious maturity and a remarkable devotion to the infant Jesus and the Virgin Mary. When she was only 3 years old, her father found her weeping, saying that she was meditating on the Passion of Christ. Such behavior astonished everyone who knew her. At 7 years old, Ursula already felt in her heart the desire to consecrate her life entirely to God. She often withdrew to recite prayers and perform small sacrifices, such as voluntary abstinence from food or renouncing play, offering everything for the salvation of souls. The signs of her vocation were increasingly clear and profound. Despite her young age, Ursula impressed the priests of her parish with the depth of her questions about the faith and the fervor of her love for the crucified Christ. On one occasion, she declared that she wished to suffer with Jesus and to offer her life to atone for offenses against God. Words such as these, coming from a child, moved even the hardest hearts. When Ursula lost her mother, the loss marked her heart deeply. At 7, she had a vision in which Our Lady appeared to her and placed the infant Jesus in her arms. This episode strengthened her interior call, giving her courage and peace to bear her grief and embrace her vocation to holiness even more firmly. As the years passed, young Ursula intensified her practice of prayer and penance. She loved to frequent the church and draw near to the tabernacle. Whenever she could, she remained in silence before the altar, contemplating the mystery of the Eucharist. There she found consolation and strength for her resolutions of total surrender to God. At 17, she felt called to enter religious life. Despite her father's initial resistance, he feared losing her to the cloister, Ursula remained steadfast in her desire. She argued that her only joy would be to belong entirely to Christ and to live hidden from the world, praying for everyone. After many pleas and tears, her father finally consented, allowing Ursula to enter the Capuchin Poor Clare monastery in Città di Castello. She left home with her heart full of joy, carrying only the essentials and leaving behind all earthly goods and affections. It was the beginning of a new stage in her spiritual life. In 1677, at age 17, she was received into the convent and took the name Sister Veronica. The name was chosen in honor of Veronica, who, according to tradition, wiped the face of Christ on the way of the cross. The choice symbolized her vocation as consoler of the heart of Jesus and reparator of the offenses committed against God. Life in the convent was austere, marked by silence, obedience, and penance. For Veronica, those strict rules were a source of joy because she desired evermore to conform herself to the cross of Christ. From the outset, she stood out for her humility and the joy with which she embraced every sacrifice. Though young and physically fragile, Sister Veronica soon volunteered for the humblest services in the convent. She helped in the kitchen, with cleaning and caring for the sick, always with a smile and never a complaint. Her charity and humility edified her sisters in religion. Her interior recollection was so intense that even amid her duties, Veronica kept her heart united to the Lord. She frequently experienced moments of deep contemplation that wrapped her in ecstasy. In these mystical states, she remained motionless for hours, her face bathed in tears. Her community sisters observed these phenomena with respect and some perplexity. A few thought they might be exaggeration or imagination, but in time, they realized Veronica was genuinely graced with supernatural gifts beyond common understanding. A striking characteristic of Saint Veronica was her desire to suffer for love. She said that every small contrariety was an opportunity to unite herself to the Lord's passion. Thus, she accepted humiliations, scorn, and illnesses with heroic patience, convinced that everything served to glorify God. The fame of holiness surrounding the young religious began to spread discreetly. Priests who accompanied her spiritually attested to her rectitude and the depth of her mystical experiences. Even so, Veronica sought to hide her gifts, fearing that vanity might taint her soul. One day, while meditating on the crown of thorns, she asked Jesus to let her share his pain. During the prayer, she felt a sharp sting in her head, as though real thorns pierced her flesh. This mystical suffering would become a constant mark of her interior life. Over the years, her union with the crucified Christ deepened. She frequently had visions of the Lord, who instructed her in spiritual secrets and called her to ever greater self-surrender. Despite so many mystical consolations, Veronica never neglected the ordinary virtues: obedience, patience, and charity. The rigor of her penance was notorious. She slept on boards, wore hair shirts, and fasted often. She did everything with the permission and supervision of her superiors, for she wished only to conform to the crucified and not to practice anything outside the spirit of obedience. The young religious nurtured a special tenderness for the Virgin Mary. She habitually invoked Our Lady as her mother and teacher. In many moments of trial, she turned to the Blessed Mother, receiving consolation and courage to persevere. Despite her love for recollection, Veronica was also an example of fraternal charity. When a sister fell ill or felt sad, she drew near discreetly, offering words of comfort and small gestures of care that eased their sufferings. On several occasions, Sister Veronica experienced mystical phenomena beyond human comprehension, including heavenly visions, dialogues with Christ, and prolonged ecstasies. These manifestations elicited both admiration and prudence among her superiors. Veronica's confessor kept detailed records of her experiences. These accounts, which would later become precious documents for her canonization, show the balance with which she faced her graces, always in humility and submission to the Church. Early in her religious life, Veronica asked God to purify her of all attachment and imperfection. She prayed insistently, "Lord, I want nothing outside of you." This purity of intention would become one of the most luminous traits of her spirituality. Reflecting on the Passion, she said that every drop of Christ's blood was an invitation to love and reparation. This awareness inflamed her heart with zeal, leading her to offer each action for those who did not love God. Veronica's youth in the convent was a time of preparation for the greater trials to come. She sensed that God would call her to bear the cross even more intensely. With serenity and trust, she surrendered herself entirely to the divine will, ready for anything. Her spiritual maturity was not limited to interior life. She was also exemplary in fulfilling common duties. She worked with joy and zeal in every assigned task, from the humblest services to choral prayer, never showing fatigue or impatience. Among the supernatural phenomena marking her life were the stigmata, For many years, Veronica begged the Lord not to grant her outward signs that might attract attention. But on 5 April 1697, while meditating on the Passion, she received in her hands, feet, and side the wounds of Christ. Upon realizing her body was bleeding, Veronica experienced both physical pain and an indescribable interior joy. To her, it was confirmation that her prayer to share in Jesus' sufferings had been heard. Even so, her first impulse was to try to hide the signs. The stigmata became visible to the sisters, who could not contain their astonishment. News reached the bishop and the order's superiors, who decided to investigate carefully. A commission of doctors and theologians was appointed to examine the phenomenon's authenticity. During the inquiry, Veronica underwent rigorous examinations and lengthy interrogations. Despite the humiliation and suspicions, she remained serene, affirming that everything belonged to God and that she desired nothing but to fulfill His will. The ecclesiastical authorities concluded there was neither fraud nor suggestion. The stigmata were authentic and could not be explained by natural causes. Nevertheless, they ordered Veronica to cover the wounds with bandages and keep absolute silence about the occurrence. This period was one of great interior purification. Veronica endured misunderstandings and judgments, even from some sisters who doubted her humility. However, she accepted all suspicions as a way to unite herself more deeply to the rejected Christ. She often said the most intense pain was not physical, but the moral pain of abandonment, calumny, and mistrust. These invisible wounds most resembled those Christ suffered on Calvary, and thus she offered them in reparation for the sins of the world. Even amid such sufferings, the flame of her love did not diminish. Rather, it grew. Veronica spent hours in prayer before the tabernacle, asking the Lord to accept her pains for all those who lived distant from faith. The fame of her wounds spread beyond the convent walls, drawing the curious and the devout. The bishop had to take measures to protect the community and preserve its recollection. Strict restrictions were imposed on visits and correspondence. Despite the rigor, Veronica maintained a docile and obedient spirit. She believed everything came from divine providence, and that obedience was the surest path to please God. Therefore, she never rebelled nor showed sadness over such limitations. During these years, her mystical experiences intensified. Veronica reported frequent visions of Christ, who spoke words of love and of the cross. Many times she saw the Lord crowned with thorns, inviting her to share his redemptive pain. In one of her visions, Jesus showed her a chalice overflowing with bitterness, saying, "Veronica, drink with me." She promptly replied, "Lord, I am ready to drink all for love of you." From that moment, she felt in herself a burning desire to atone for others' sins. Another feature of her spiritual life was the gift of discerning hearts. By divine inspiration, she perceived the interior dispositions of those who sought her. Many priests turned to her for counsel and spiritual guidance. Her charity also manifested in unceasing prayer for the souls in purgatory. Veronica said she saw those souls asking for intercession, and she offered fasts and vigils for their liberation. Devotion to the suffering souls was constant in her life. Despite the intensity of her graces, Veronica remained aware of her human limitations. She humbled herself before God, acknowledging her miseries and imploring that He not allow her to fall into pride. She often repeated, "I am only a poor creature." During Lent, she multiplied her penances. She spent long hours in prayer and fasting, always with the superior's permission. She even spent whole nights in contemplation, united to Jesus' sufferings in the agony of Gethsemane. Her spiritual writings, composed out of obedience, bear witness to the depth of her relationship with God. They are pages of blazing love and total surrender. Later, these manuscripts would be recognized by the Church as of great mystical value. Veronica was also granted the transverberation of the heart, a phenomenon in which she felt as if a flame of divine love pierced her chest. This experience, similar to that of Saint Teresa of Avila, left her with an internal wound and a supernatural joy. During the strongest crises of pain, she said she felt sustained by God's hand. Despite all suffering, her countenance retained peace, and even a certain luminosity that impressed those who beheld her. Many thought these graces would distance her from community life, but Veronica never became indifferent to its needs. She continued participating in common life with simplicity, helping in the infirmary and aiding the elderly sisters. Her humility was so profound that although she was the object of curiosity and admiration, she insisted on calling herself the most unworthy in the convent. She would not allow anyone to consider her a saint in life, affirming that everything was God's mercy. In moments of recollection, she often meditated on the sufferings of the Virgin Mary. In the Sorrowful Mother, she found the perfect image of silent surrender, which inspired her not to complain about anything, even in the harshest trials. Her confessor and superiors ensured that everything was carefully discerned. Whenever Veronica reported visions or extraordinary phenomena, she submitted to the Church's judgment, preferring to renounce any manifestation rather than risk spiritual deception. The years of stigmata, visions, and sufferings marked her existence deeply. Yet for her, everything was grace. Her only concern was to love God without measure, welcoming every pain as a gift, a seal of union with the wounded heart of the Redeemer. Over time, Veronica gained a moral and spiritual authority that made her a reference both in the convent and beyond. Although always humble, the sisters began to perceive in her a special light, a living witness of absolute fidelity to God. At 34, in 1694, she was appointed Mistress of Novices. This position required not only prudence and zeal, but also a profound interior life. Veronica accepted the mission with fear and humility, incessantly asking the Holy Spirit for light and strength to lead the young women to holiness. As mistress, she sought to teach mainly by example. She encouraged the novices to embrace the cross with confidence and not be content with superficial devotion. She repeated that religious life was a path of crucified love, to be trodden with generosity and perseverance. Her spiritual pedagogy was based on three pillars: humility, obedience, and charity. Veronica insisted that without these virtues, no soul could truly grow in union with God. Therefore, she accompanied each novice with personal attention and constant prayers. Despite her responsibilities, she continued subject to mystical phenomena and intense interior sufferings. At night, she was often seen in prolonged prayer, with silent tears flowing from her desire to repair offenses against the heart of Jesus. Veronica's fame for holiness spread ever farther. Priests, religious, and even bishops sought her counsel or asked for her prayers. Whenever possible, she replied with simplicity, avoiding any notoriety. Her only concern was to fulfill God's will. In 1716, she was elected abbess of the convent. The election caused her great fear, for she considered herself unworthy of such high responsibility. Nevertheless, in total obedience, she accepted the office and asked Jesus to be himself the true guide of the community. As abbess, Veronica demonstrated extraordinary wisdom and prudence. She administered the convent's goods justly, cared for the sisters' spiritual and material well-being, and watched over observance of the rule. She did everything with a spirit of service, never superiority. During her governance, she encouraged everyone to cultivate an intense interior life and great confidence in divine providence. Even in financial difficulties, she repeated, "If God is with us, we lack nothing." This unshakable faith sustained the community. Despite her office, Veronica continued to devote herself to humble tasks whenever she could, washing dishes, caring for the sick, mending clothes. For her, there was no difference between ordinary work and moments of prayer. Everything was offered as a sacrifice of love. In these later years, her physical sufferings intensified. The open wounds of the stigmata caused her atrocious pain, but she hid them whenever possible, covering them with bandages and bearing everything in silence. If asked whether she was well, she answered only, "Thanks be to God." During certain celebrations, the sisters witnessed visible manifestations of her union with God. In some processions or moments of adoration, her face shone with a peace that seemed supernatural, as if she already shared in heavenly glory. When she sensed her health beginning to fail, Veronica intensified her prayers for the whole world. She said she wanted to die as a victim of love, offering every breath for the conversion of sinners and the sanctification of the Church. The writings she left out of obedience are impressive testimonies of a soul ablaze with charity. There she described in detail her visions of Christ, the Virgin Mary, the angels, and the souls in purgatory, always with great humility and sobriety. An important aspect of her final years was the growing experience of total abandonment to God. Even when she felt no spiritual consolation, she held firm her trust. She said she wanted to love God, not for consolations, but because He deserved to be loved above all. Her interior trials included moments of extreme dryness when she felt as if everything had disappeared. Light, sweetness, peace. In those periods, she often repeated, "Lord, your will be done." This fidelity in the dark night was one of the greatest proofs of her sanctity. At the same time, she sometimes received consolations so sublime that she was wrapped in ecstasy. On such occasions, she had visions of paradise and felt her heart flooded by a flame of love no words could describe. Witnesses who lived with her confirmed that even amid pains and ecstasies, Veronica never failed to fulfill all daily duties faithfully. For her, holiness passed through faithfulness in small things. In her last months of life, her health visibly deteriorated. The pains became constant, and she lost much weight. Even so, she did not want special treatment, preferring to be cared for like any sick sister. While bedridden, she kept a crucifix pressed to her chest. Her frequent last words were pleas for the world and the Church. "Lord, have mercy on sinners, save souls, be known and loved." The doctors attending her were impressed by her endurance and serenity. Many said it would be humanly impossible to bear so much suffering without losing peace. But Veronica showed that God's grace can do all things. Shortly before dying, she called the community and asked forgiveness for any fault. She exhorted the sisters to live in perfect charity and fidelity to the rule. She said she wished to be forgotten and that her only desire was that Jesus be loved. Her death occurred on 9 July 1727. At 66 years of age, she surrendered her soul to God with a serene countenance, holding the crucifix. Witnesses said that at the moment of her death, her room was filled with a gentle, heavenly fragrance. Her body was buried in the convent of Città di Castello. and soon reports of graces obtained through her intercession began to arrive. Many pilgrims went to her tomb to ask favors and give thanks for healings and conversions. Her reputation for holiness was consolidated over the following decades until the Church officially recognized her heroic life and her spiritual writings as a treasure for all Christians. Thus, Veronica entered history as one of the great mystics of the Church. After her death, the testimony of Veronica Giuliani's sanctity continued to spread. Numerous faithful reported special graces attributed to her intercession, including healings, conversions, and family reconciliations. Her tomb became a place of constant pilgrimage. The nuns of the convent of Città di Castello carefully preserved her spiritual writings, which totaled thousands of pages. These manuscripts, composed out of obedience, contain detailed descriptions of her visions, mystical dialogues, and profound reflections on Christ's passion. During the beatification process, begun a few decades after her death, the Church gathered numerous testimonies and evaluated her writings rigorously. Theologians confirmed that there was nothing in them contrary to Catholic faith or morals. One aspect that drew attention was the clarity with which Veronica united the highest mystical experience to absolute obedience to the Church. She never allowed herself to act outside the authority of confessors and superiors, being a model of humble submission. The stigmata, duly investigated by doctors, continued to impress experts. Detailed records remain of wounds that bled periodically without scientific explanation. Many scholars regard her stigmata as one of the best documented cases in Christian history. Another central element of her spirituality was devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Veronica said she saw in Christ's heart the inexhaustible fountain of mercy. This devotion spread forcefully in subsequent centuries and found in her a remarkable precursor. In her writings, she taught that reparation for offenses against the heart of Jesus was one of the greatest expressions of Christian love. Her entire life was a silent offering for all who lived indifferent to God. Veronica's heroic virtues were officially recognized by the Church, which beatified her on 17th of June 1804 under the pontificate of Pope Pius VII. On that occasion, many Italian faithful fervently celebrated the recognition of the sanctity of the one who had been called Mirror of Perfection. As years passed, her fame only grew. Numerous religious and lay congregations drew inspiration from her example of reparative love and profound humility. She became a special reference for those wishing to unite contemplation and sacrifice. Finally, on 26th May 1839, Pope Gregory XVI solemnly proclaimed her canonization. Saint Veronica Giuliani was declared a saint before the entire Church, and her example began to be officially proposed to the faithful worldwide. In canonizing her, the Pope stressed that her life was a luminous testimony of union with the crucified Christ and that her writings were a source of edification and spiritual consolation. She was considered one of the greatest mystics of the modern era. Today, her incorrupt body rests in the convent of Città di Castello, where thousands of pilgrims come each year. Many report feeling a profound peace while praying at her tomb, as if her spiritual presence still enveloped the place. Saint Veronica is regarded as patroness of those who seek to live reparation for sins and of all who desire to grow in contemplation of the mysteries of the Passion. Her example continues to inspire priests, religious and lay people. Her life reminds the world that holiness consists not only in extraordinary phenomena, but above all in daily fidelity to God's will. Despite her mystical gifts, it was in humility and everyday love that she found the path to perfection. Many scholars note that Veronica's influence also contributed to the flourishing of devotion to the heart of Jesus, alongside Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque. Both saints helped renew spiritual fervor in the Baroque period. Her writings have been translated into various languages and continue to inspire retreats and spiritual reflections. Priests and religious often turn to her diaries to deepen their understanding of redemptive suffering and union with Christ. Her example of patience in illness and obedience in trials remains timely. She never complained of her sufferings. Instead, she offered everything out of love and for the good of the Church. This heroic disposition is both a challenge and an invitation to Christians of all times. Saint Veronica teaches us that true contemplation does not alienate from the world, but makes the soul more capable of love. Her love for Jesus overflowed in attentiveness to her sisters, in humble service, and in incessant prayer for sinners. In many religious communities, her memory is celebrated with great veneration on 9th July, the date of her entrance into heaven. On that occasion, it is customary to seek her intercession for those who suffer in soul and body. Traditional iconography depicts her holding a crucifix or showing her transverberated heart as a symbol of her burning love. Angels often appear assisting her, recalling her heavenly visions and ecstasies. Saint Veronica is also remembered as a woman of courage, for she feared neither human judgments nor misunderstandings. She always preferred to please God rather than seek esteem or recognition from men. Her testimony remains a light in the heart of the Church, showing that fidelity to the gospel is possible even in the most adverse situations. She invites us not to be afraid, to let ourselves be consumed by the love of Christ. Contemplating her life, we learn that God can work wonders in souls totally surrendered to Him. Despite human weaknesses, divine grace transforms hearts and lifts them to the heights of sanctity. Today, her name is invoked as a model of balanced mystical life, active charity, and heroic obedience. Saint Veronica Giuliani is one of the spiritual jewels God has given to the Church. May her example help us live generously the call to holiness, to love Jesus deeply, and to trust that, even amid pains and trials, the love of God always triumphs.